But coming up right now, an interview with Jeff Garcia talking Spurs future and the Wemby mania that is sweeping not only through San Antonio, but the rest of the world. And without further ado, Jeff Garcia, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm like the rest of the Spurs fan base right now. I am on cloud nine. It's bright in San Antonio. It was funny. I was talking to the producer before we jumped on, and he goes like, "Well, we're gonna talk about the elephant in the room." I go, "What do you mean the giraffe in the room?" Because that's what it's like. He's like, we're talking about the giraffe in the room. He's that freaking tall, but also with a huge skill set. Back to the basket game, front facing game. Yes, I'm gonna say a 7'4" or 5, whatever they're listing. Can take you off the dribble. I mean, this is just insane.
Absolutely.
This is just great for the Spurs. Obviously, there's a lot of hype. I'm trying to temper expectations. I know he's a great corner piece to build on, but we got to remember he's just a teenager. He's just 19 years old right now. So we'll see how he handles that pressure. We'll see how he fits into the NBA style. There are a lot more pros and cons, of course, but like every rookie, whether you're Tim Duncan, remember when he came in, what was the knock on him? He can't make free throws. He has to work on that. So every rookie comes in with some knocks, no matter you're a 4-year college graduate, a 19-year-old like Wemby is, or somewhere in between. But the future is bright in San Antonio.
Absolutely. Indeed it is. And once again, thank you for joining us here today. And first off, what was your reaction when you saw that the Hornets got that number 2 pick and you knew that the Spurs were coming up right after?
I saw it coming the moment Houston dropped out. And there was just 3 teams left. Because of the 3, the Spurs had the highest percentage to win of the 3. I think it was Hornets, Rockets, Spurs, and I forget the other team.
It was Portland at 3 and then the Hornets at 2.
Yeah. Right. So when Houston got knocked out, I said, forget about it. It's done. It's a wrap. And the Spurs got it. There's no way. And sure enough, they did. I mean, of course, they jumping up and down, celebrating, pumping the fist in. But my first thought was, okay, now what? Okay, great. The rebuild isn't over. Obviously it's cut down a few seasons, but we'll see what the Spurs can do. And I think they're going to make some noise, whether it be this offseason or now, practically, with the amount of assets in their war chest right now, or do they let this time for the kid Wemby to slow cook? So look, this is not a surprise. The Spurs decide to do a slower development path with him. No Spurs fan should be surprised. Don't want to bring up his name, but you kind of have to. Josh Primo. When Josh Primo was a Spur, Brian Wright made it very clear that Primo was going to take his own path, take his own time. I believe they said the same thing with Blake Wesley. It was not like Branham. So should it be a surprise if the Spurs do take more of a gentle path with Wemby's development? But he's going to make an impact come day one on and off the court.
And with that, speaking of the Spurs, in the offseason, who do you think that the Spurs are going to target? And also, do you see San Antonio potentially making a move back into the top 10 of this year's draft, as well as that first pick?
I think I definitely see them, like, if you talk about the 2024 draft, like next draft, like 2 years from now.
I think moving up again to try and secure another pick with the load that they have this year.
Just in this current draft, like just moving up. Got it. You know what? They can do that. They definitely can do that. Obviously they're doing their due diligence at the NBA Combine right now. And they spoke to, reportedly to Amen Thompson, and he's projected to be a top 10 pick. The Spurs can't do that. But, you look at, some of the teams that landed in the top 10, wouldn't be surprised if they're looking to shop that move, that pick. And the Spurs can't do that. And I mean, what is that? Close to 10 first round picks, something like that?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. A boatload of second round picks. So yeah, if a team like Portland wants to rebuild and dump their number 3 pick, go for it. Spurs can definitely give that team not only picks but players too. The Spurs have expiring contracts and veteran type players. Your Doug McDermott, for example, he sees a flippable contract right there. So the Spurs are well positioned to make any move they can. And that's just their picks. And that's just their current players that are on roster right now. We haven't even touched about the fact they got all that money. They're sitting on a boatload of money to spend. And per NBA rules, they're going to have to spend it. So we'll see what kind of moves they make. So who knows? Perhaps Wemby is enough for the Spurs to buck that, trend of never attracting free agents except for one, LaMarcus Aldridge. So, and I think the Spurs are finally going to be able to be a destination team now that Wemby is there. It's a young core. The future is bright. And I think it'd be great. I fantasize any type of scenario you want, Spurs fans. The Spurs have the assets to do that.
Absolutely. We're talking with Jeff Garcia of KENS 5 San Antonio, host of the Locked In on Spurs podcast, and just gauging what is the current vibe around the city. Are you noticing a lot more Spurs gear now that they got this first pick this year?
Not just in San Antonio, but in France. Right before I came on the show with you guys, I came across an article about how Spurs caps are in demand right now in France. The baseball caps. Everybody in France are just looking for them. But as far as locally in San Antonio, and I'm pretty sure in Corpus as well, the fan bases, they're hyped right now.
Yeah.
Taking photos of the murals, taking photos of that infamous mural of Wemby and his Spurs uniform before the draft. The draft lottery, excuse me. So it's at a fever pitch. Spurs fans were at the AT&T yesterday. For those that were looking to buy season tickets, they can go and look at their seats. From ticket sales to the eventual merchandise that they would be pumped around Wemby. And get this too, just the NBA. Now, forget about the Spurs marketing or perhaps France marketing, the possibility. We all know what's going to happen. Wemby in San Antonio, although the Spurs are playing coy right now. Brian Wright and Peter J. Holt are like, we don't know who we're going to pick. Right? So, but you look at the NBA, he's not even in the league yet. And the NBA already announced that he's going to headline the first ever NBA con in Las Vegas. He's not even in the league yet. And he's already part of their headliners.
Unreal.
So that's just unreal. So it's obviously going to put San Antonio on the map times 10. Whatever Duncan did, whatever Robinson did, and to a certain degree, whatever Ice did, George Gervin, Wemby, if he pans out, we definitely put San Antonio on the map. I think fans are going to be excited. The AT&T Center is going to be a lot louder than it was in the last couple of seasons. I'll tell you that much. Fans are telling me that last season they couldn't give away tickets. They would just have to eat it because nobody wanted to go. I think that's going to change overnight, probably. Yeah, and as next season is approaching.
Hey, Jeff, it's Aiden here. The NBA reporter Mark Stein put out that the Spurs were expecting to have Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker mentioned Victor Wembanyama. I just want to know what your overall thoughts are on that, because I believe I think those are the right people to have around Victor Wembanyama. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on that was that told me a lot that Spurs fans obviously don't read my articles. That's what it told me, because this is nothing new. I spoke to Keldon Johnson about it last year. And he says, like, Tim Duncan, Manu, and Tony, they're always there. LaMarcus Aldridge, years ago, he said in a chat he had with me that Timmy was there working with him. Jakob Poeltl, Timmy was always working there with him. And the big guys, even to Charles Bassey. So this is nothing new. So, and if you want to read that article about the big three still in San Antonio working with the guys, just go to my Twitter page at Jeff G. Spurs Zone. You can't miss it. But you don't know what Mark Stein reported is nothing new. It's nothing earth-shattering. It's not groundbreaking. They've always done that. You want even bigger proof? Manu Ginobili is hired by the Spurs to be a player development guy. So Tim Duncan was an assistant coach for one season. So they've always been around, and this is good to know that Wemby and the core will still have them coming to the training center, the brand new training center, I should say, and work with these young guys, because there's still more fine tuning to work with. Not just Wemby is going to need some work. It's still Keldon Johnson. Can he develop more of a finesse game instead of just always defaulting to the barrel your head to the ground and go to the basket? What about Malachi Branham? What's his next step? Blake Wesley. Decision making has to be better. So it's not just Wemby. The entire team still has room for improvement. One thing I think they should do right now is focus more on bringing veteran presence to this roster. I think that needs to happen. there's no knock on Doug McDermott or Zach Collins or Gorgie James, but I think a little bit more veteran presence will do this team wonders next season.
We're talking with Jeff Garcia of KENS 5 San Antonio and the host of the Locked On Spurs podcast. And who would be your dream signing, whether it's this offseason or next offseason when we see a lot more high-profile talent coming onto the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to cushion this by saying there's a part of me that wants to see how it starts out the season. Let's just see how we go with this current mix if they don't make any major moves. Let's see how their starting lineup will look like, and then we can go from there. Trey Jones is the name that many Spurs fans are talking about right now. Like, is he the right fit at that position? From me to you, to your listeners, to the Spurs fans in Corpus Christi, I think we all know that a scoring point guard is needed for this team.
Yeah.
We're not taking a shot at Trey Jones at all. As a matter of fact, I think he was the most improved Spur last season, pound for pound, with his big leap. But he's a bit undersized. You can't rely on him to be that offensive juggernaut at that position. I think the Spurs need that catch on fire, give you 20 and a quarter, no problem. Something like that. Look at the playoffs right now, or just the playoffs in general. There's Steph Curry, obviously he can light it up. Jamal Murray, another guard in the wing that can just light it up. So I think they need that. Look, and I don't want them to part ways with Trey Jones. Remember, he is a restricted free agent this offseason. But if they can somehow keep him on the roster, move him to a backup spot, look at the free agents. There's Fred VanVleet. He's out there. I think he'd be a great addition to San Antonio. But that's the joy of the Spurs have. They can make moves. I don't think anybody would be surprised if the Spurs don't re-sign Trey Jones and they go out for somebody else. I mean, they got to build around Wemby, and that's what this team just lacks right now. They got wings, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah.
They got a lot of good big guards. Malachi Branham, just to name one, but the point guard spot is still in question. Blake Wesley, I don't think he's ready for that. There is some hope. Jeremy Sohan did run the point often last season, so perhaps they could be just tried out a big lineup. But I would love to see them just beef up that position, and I think the Spurs will be all right.
We're talking with Jeff Garcia, KENS 5 San Antonio, host of the Locked On Spurs podcast. Aiden here again. So the last few off seasons, there's always small rumblings of, well, when is Popovich going to retire? Is this the final season? Is somebody going to take over? But with Wembanyama, going to be a Spur when the NBA draft comes up, does this extend the career of Greg Popovich? Or I guess we could say it does, but how long do you think he's going to be a Spurs coach?
I still have it. What I always thought, even if Wemby didn't come or not, still at 2 this upcoming, and then plus one more. So who knows? Maybe Wemby accelerates it to a 3rd. He's 74 years old, I believe. And, he's still in shape. He talks about how every time he's on the road, he's either on the treadmill or he goes out to cities and starts walking around the blocks. He still, smiles. There's no physical ailments with him that we know of. So I think he'll stay around, and he has nothing to lose but everything to gain. He's already proven himself as an NBA coach. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame in a few weeks. He's going to be cemented in that milestone. So all he can do now is train Wemby, get him on the right path, put him on a path where he realizes that it's bigger than basketball, that you got to protect your name, you got to protect the franchise. You put on that jersey and what it means, and the footsteps that he's following, David Robinson, Tim Duncan. And again, I circle back to this. Spurs fans have to understand he's still a teenager, and that be Wemby. So, and I think Popovich will help him keep that professional vibe going.
Yes.
And hopefully he doesn't stray because, he's just a kid. So we got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I told Alex earlier in the show, like, there's always people saying that, oh, he's gonna learn that the NBA is a different animal, and I said nobody's gonna humble Wembanyama more than Greg Popovich himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Greg Popovich is the perfect coach for Wembanyama to help him ease his way into the league, and so
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, look, is he going to get humbled just on the court? Of course he is. For as much as the pros are, and there are tons of pros about his potential, there's also some cons. Like there's some question marks. Like, why didn't he play at the highest league in Europe? He was offered, he declined. We got to keep in mind, there's no knock on the league that he's playing right now in France, but it's not the highest league in Europe. It's the highest league in France. So what's going to happen when he plays against the highest players in all of the world, in a few months? Of course, there's his height and the history of big men in the NBA at that height. We'll see what happens with there. And he really has some injuries. He's had he's had leg and back issues already. He's broken a leg bone. I forget which one already. But he did it. He was a teenager, so he can bounce back fast. So I think the Spurs, in that sense, well, obviously they're going to load manage him, everybody. Nobody should be surprised. He ain't going to play 82 games. Brace yourself that it's not going to happen. But that's the Spurs. That's what they'll do. They'll rest. They'll maintain to extend players' careers. Not just Wemby. They did it to Timmy. They did it to Manu. They did it to Tony. So they have the blueprint to keep Wemby in a Spurs uniform and keep him successful for a long time.
Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for joining us.
Sir.
And
yes, sir. Anytime.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And, of course, the future is looking bright for the
Absolutely.
Spurs. You have a great one, Jeff.
You too. Y'all be good. Bye-bye.
And there goes Jeff Garcia of KENS 5 San Antonio and the host of the Locked On Spurs podcast. Things are looking bright for the San Antonio Spurs.